Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hi there, John McAdams here, and you are listening to episode 329 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. I am pleased to announce that Dr. Kevin Robertson is back on the show with me again today. In this episode, we discuss the whole spectrum of classic safari hunting cartridges, 50 caliber and larger. We talk about a lot of old standbys like the 500 Nitro Express, the 505 Gibbs, and the 577 Nitro. We talk about a couple of more obscure cartridges, and we also talk about some serious retina detaching, clavicle breaking, heavy hitting rounds as well. So if you are looking for a serious big bore episode about serious big bore cartridges, this is the episode for you. Now, as usual, Kevin does share some of his stories about some of these cartridges afield on game, and I actually spliced in an especially hair-raising story he told from a previous interview that happens to involve a couple of the cartridges we focus on in today's episode as well. Now, note that this episode is on classic safari hunting cartridges. That's why we don't talk about stuff like the 50 BMG or the 50 Beowulf. Not to worry, though, I do have another episode in the works where I'll talk about those other 50-plus caliber cartridges we didn't discuss in this episode. Before we get started talking with Kevin, I have two important administrative notes to talk to you about. First, I'm doing another big game hunting podcast, Safari Hunt in Africa, 19 to 28 July 2025. I went down the list of listeners who previously contacted me expressing interest in going on another podcast hunt. For that reason, this hunt filled up almost immediately. There's one catch, though. Unfortunately, one of the hunters booked for this hunt has a medical condition that is looking like it will probably prevent him from joining us next summer. At this point, it's not looking like he'll make it. I'd put his odds at about 25% that he will receive medical clearance to travel. For that reason, I want to book one person as an alternate in case that other hunter cannot come. This hunter that's having the medical problems will know one way or another in January of 2025. Now, this guy is booked for buffalo and plains game, so I want to book an alternate hunter who's also interested in buffalo and plains game. Shoot me an email if you are interested, and we can talk details. The gist of things is that everyone attending the podcast hunt is hunting at a discount compared to our regular pricing. If you book as an alternate, I will, of course, extend the same pricing to you. If the other hunter cannot come, you'll have a spot, and we'll have a great time together. If that other hunter can come, I will either refund your deposit or I will rebook you for another opening we have in our schedule, and you can still hunt at that discounted price. You can't lose with this offer. Email me, john@thebiggamehuntingblog.com with the subject line Podcast Hunt. We can discuss this in more detail. Speaking of discounted hunts, we have two openings remaining in our schedule for late October and early November 2024. I have slashed prices for those dates. You can hunt plains game, you can hunt buffalo, you can hunt both then if you so choose. So if you didn't draw a tag anywhere this year, or if you just otherwise have an opening in October or November and you want to hunt, this is a great opportunity to enjoy an African safari during the time of year where the hunting is fantastic, especially for kudu, impala, buffalo, and wildebeest, and do so at a discount. If you're interested, email me, john@thebiggamehuntingblog.com, and I would be happy to discuss pricing and dates in more detail. Okay, let's dive into things with Kevin. And before we get started, remember, Kevin and I are both expressing our opinions about these cartridges in this episode, and it will not hurt our feelings if you respectfully disagree with us. Let's get started. Well, good evening, Kevin. It is wonderful having you back on the show. Last time you were here, we talked about cartridges that started with the number 4. Now we're going to talk about all the really big stuff like that. So, as you like to do, and as the audience likes for you to do, can you start off with an interesting story about one of these cartridges we're going to talk about today?
Yes, good evening, John, and nice to be back. It's been a while, and just talking about calibers and cartridges is one of my passions in life, so I'm more than happy to dive in. So let me start with a story. This was back when I was hunting professionally in Zimbabwe in the good old days, and I there was an area in Zimbabwe called the Makuti and the Terrari Safari areas, which were designated for resident hunters only. And one of the characters in Harare was a guy called Paul Clark, and he owned a company called Clark Marine. He was very into boats and outboard motors and stuff like that, and he booked a buffalo and a leopard hunt. We drew a buffalo and leopard hunt, and then he contracted me to outfit the hunt for him. And now, in the process of getting ready for the hunt, he acquired a 500A square, and this was a proper 500A square rifle. It was called the Hannibal rifle, and he acquired some factory-loaded ammo for it, which was loaded by Norma in those days, because I once went to Norma and I saw where Norma, the factory in Sweden, was actually loading the Weatherby ammo. And the 500A square, it's the 460 Weatherby case blown out to .510, and it shoots a 600 grain bullet at supposedly 2,400 feet per second. Anyway, he got this Weatherby ammo and he went and chronographed it, and to his disappointment, he found that the 600 grainers were only doing 2,150 feet per second. So he thought, no, hell, man, this is not what it's supposed to be. So he was quite an avid reloader, and so he reloaded up some full house loads to get to the desired velocity of 2,400 feet per second. And he went to the shooting range, and all the benches were occupied. So he said, no, well, he'll just use the bonnet of his Land Cruiser as the shooting bench. So he put a couple of bags on the bonnet of his Land Cruiser, leaned across the bonnet, and took a shot with his new hot loaded 500 Nitro Express, and the muzzle blast blew out the windscreen of his Land Cruiser, and the recoil tore his rotator cuff on his shoulder. So he was one shot, and that was it. No windscreen in his Land Rover, and for the rest of his life, he could never lift his arm above his head because his rotator cuff was severely damaged. Yeah, so that's what all that amount of recoil does for you. It was just he couldn't. That just. I mean, you're talking in recoil into well over 100 or probably 120 foot-pounds of recoil energy and stuff like that. And that just tore his shoulder, and the muzzle blast blew the windscreen out of his Land Cruiser.
Oh my goodness, geez. Well, so I guess that was it for that rifle for him then, huh?
Well, he carried on with that, and he suddenly realized why the factory ammo was at a more sedate velocity. The recoil between a 600 grain bullet doing 2,150 feet per second and the same bullet doing 2,400 feet per second, it's velocity squared. So that makes a massive difference in the amount of felt recoil.
Yeah, so in your book, Africa's Most Dangerous, you have the 500A square in the table with both of those ballistic, 2150, 2400, and it goes from 86 to 112 foot-pounds of energy
12.
with a 11-pound rifle like that, yeah.
It's quite hard to make a bolt-action rifle heavier than 11 pounds. Well, you can get it to 12 pounds, but when you start talking about ballistics like that, you need to have a 12 or a 13 or maybe even a 14-pound rifle to be able to handle that recoil. To tell you one thing, though, that the A-square rifles, they have what they call this coil-check stock. It's a very chunky stock. It's quite pleasant to shoot, but God, it's an awful rifle to carry. I once carried one of those rifles. One of the students, when we were down in the Zambezi Valley on a training course, one of the students there had a Hannibal rifle, and I said, well, let me just carry this rifle for a day just to see what it's like. I was comparing it to carrying my 505 Gibbs. Mm-hmm. The rifles rated pretty much similar in weight, but it was just an awful rifle to carry. I consider it like carrying a log. It was chunky and heavy and just awful. Nice rifle to shoot, but an awful rifle to carry. I do have a friend called Gavin Rourke. He's a very well-known Zimbabwean PH. And Gavin Rourke makes me look small. I mean, he's a huge bear of a man, and he's got his carry rifle is a 500 A square, a Hannibal rifle, and he loads full house loads as well. But he can handle it. But I mean, he's weighs more than 300 pounds, and he's a massive guy, and he can handle that sort of level of recoil. But I don't know. I didn't enjoy that amount of recoil.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that stock, the coil check stock that you were just referring to?
Yeah, so it was designed by Art Alpin, and he put it onto his rifle he called his Hannibal rifle. And that Hannibal rifle's on I think it's a P14 or P17 action, which is a bit unusual because there's a cock-on closing action, which if you spent your life carrying a Mauser 98, it's a cock-on opening action. So it's a very different feel to using a rifle that you have to use more force to close the bolt, because the closing of the bolt actually cocks the firing pin. But it is extremely thin. So the area of the recoil pad, I mean, it's probably about twice the size of the recoil pad of a normal rifle, and very vertical pistol grip. The pistol grip, so it's almost like a bench rest rifle. If you had to make a 500 bench rest rifle, I mean, that's what the stock would look like. I mean, the forend, I mean, it's massive. It's not slim and nicely handled for your hand. It's just the whole stock is just chunky and big, and which makes it shoot nicely. But geez, it's to try and carry one of those things all day, you end up like carrying a corner post for a fence all day long. It was just awful. I really didn't enjoy it.
Well, let's back up a little bit and kind of go back to the beginning here, and we'll work our way forward through all these cartridges, and we'll go to one that is still a big bore and still a reasonably powerful cartridge, but on a much lower level than the 500A square, and it doesn't recoil nearly as much, with the 500 Black Powder Express.
I remember you telling me that your dad has a 500 Black Powder Express. Can you tell me about his rifle?
Yeah, so he always wanted a double rifle, and finally, pretty recently, in the last few years, had the money to buy one that he came across. It is a Cogswell and Harrison in 500 Black Powder Express. Beautiful rifle. He has the paperwork for it, made in the 1890s, I think, so very old rifle, in very good shape. I want to say it was made for a British officer going to India way back a long time ago. And I've shot it several times. He's built his own smokeless loads for it that approximate the old black powder loads, and it's regulated well to shoot them, and it shoots them fairly accurately. And I want to say it's a 440 grain bullet at around 1900 feet per second. Much less powerful than almost anything else we're going to talk about here today, and it falls below that 4,000 foot-pound minimum. That
worked at about 3,500 feet per second. So it's close. It's sort of probably about the same amount of energy as a 9.3x62, I should imagine.
Yeah, probably something like that. A little bit heavier bullet, going a little bit slower. I heard it was very popular in India for tiger hunting and whatnot a long time ago, and I think probably because the ballistics of it were more sedate. I don't know that it was ever very popular in Africa for dangerous game, anyway.
I never really heard about it, but I definitely know it was popular in India. Tigers are thin-skinned and light-boned, and a big bullet going. And I suppose those bullets were probably just really relatively soft lead, or so they expanded quite quickly. So I can imagine being a really effective combination for the big cats. Probably would work well on lions as well. And but with black powder, I don't know if you ever shot proper black powder. Your first shot, and then your vision disappears for a couple of seconds, and all that smoke. So I wouldn't like to be facing a charging lion and have it shoot it with a black powder rifle and not see the effect of your shot because of all that smoke.
Yeah, that is definitely the thing with it. He has a couple of old bullets. I'm trying to find the right way to describe them. It is like a hollow point bullet, but with a copper tube inserted in it the other way around, with the idea being that when it hits something, that copper tube initiates expansion on it. So it's a very soft bullet. These particular ones are, and I imagine that would be just absolutely devastating on something like a leopard or leopard, lion, tiger if you shot one with it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that rapid expansion, that's what you need to get that bullet to release all its hydrodynamic energy quickly. And, and as we say, you can kill a big cat with hydrodynamic shock. So, I can understand why that was popular in India, but I wouldn't like to use one of those on a buffalo or something with a thick skin. Definitely not.
Yeah, so So you said that you didn't have any personal experience, didn't know anyone that had any of these in Africa back when you were still over there then.
I've never seen one, and I can understand why, because they probably just weren't suitable for the thick-skinned, dangerous game that I was, I like to hunt. So, and I can just understand why, because the ballistics just don't cut the mustard.
Mm-hmm. And especially when you have so many other
Yeah.
alternatives that are more suitable for that. So let's step up a little bit to the 500 Nitro Express. So very similar in overall dimensions to the old 500 black powder, but quite a bit more powerful, loaded with cordite, smokeless powder in this case. And so instead of throwing a 440 grain bullet at 1900 feet per second, you're throwing a 570 grain bullet at 2150 thereabouts. So massive step up in power.
Yeah, that's a huge step up. And
yeah,
and for my friends in Zimbabwe, well, my PH friends that specialize in elephant hunting, this is the go-to cartridge, because for a number of reasons. First of all, it can be built into about a 12-pound rifle, which is certainly carryable, and with that sort of ballistics, 570 grain bullet, and the sectional density of that bullet is 0.313, which that's okay. It's not really all that great, but it definitely does work. But you've got a massive frontal surface area. That's giving you just less than 6,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, the momentum value of 175, and a knockout of 89, which is pretty substantial. But what makes the 500 Nitro Express a popular choice for big game for elephant hunters is that the free recoil energy is only 76 foot-pounds of free recoil energy at about 20 feet per second, or free recoil velocity. So that makes it pretty manageable. I've said before that I believe that 50 foot-pounds of free recoil energy is about as much as Mr. Average can handle. So now you're talking about 76. So it takes a dedicated effort to learn how to shoot a 500 Nitro Express pretty well, but it certainly is manageable and doable. And I've got PH friends. My good friend Buzz Charlton, I mean, he's a small little guy. He probably only doesn't weigh 200 pounds, and he can handle that and shoot that rifle really well. So it is manageable with a good, well-balanced rifle. I've always said before, there are carrying rifles, there are shooting rifles, and there are quality rifles. Carrying rifle is a rifle that's nice to carry, but it's lousy to shoot. A shooting rifle is one that shoots nicely, but is lousy to carry, like the Hannibal rifle we mentioned earlier. And then you get a really good quality rifle that carries well and that shoots well. And those carries a Heim 500 Nitro Express, and they're just beautiful rifles, well balanced, and they just got it right. And although they're made in Germany, they are basically a British style double rifle made in Germany, and they're very popular with the PHs and reliable, and they carry well and they shoot well. So, and Albus can handle his 500 really well. So it's a good choice for a PH. It's probably not a good choice for a guy going to hunt elephants, because I just think it takes too much effort to learn to shoot a rifle like that really well.
Yeah, the interesting thing about it is I'm looking at the ballistics right now. So 570 grain bullet at 2150 gets you about 5850 foot-pounds of energy, and with a 12-pound rifle, 76 foot-pounds of free recoil energy. With the 470, you have a 500 grain bullet at 2150, so for just over 5,100 foot-pounds of energy. So big step up in power there. Similar with momentum. You have the figures for the 470 with an 11-pound rifle, and that's 72 foot-pounds of recoil energy. So just a little bit more for the 500, but for a big step up in power.
Yeah, so that's the reason why the elephant PH is like the 500 over the 470.
Well, so I guess the answer would probably be in the momentum value then. So we have 154 for the 470 and 175 for the 500. So even though their sectional density values are very similar, and actually the 470 is a tiny bit higher, 317 versus 313. So you think that is why it's so much more popular and so effective in the hands of elephant hunters over there then?
Yeah, because the energy makes no difference to an elephant, so it's the momentum, and then momentum equates to penetration, so yeah, I prefer sectional density and momentum are the figures that really I give more emphasis to than energy, because you just can't kill a big animal like a buffalo or an elephant with energy.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and that is 14% more momentum with it, with just a small
Yeah.
increase in recoil like that with a heavier rifle. So it seems like with all of the bigger bore calibers, say larger than 40, 45, 47 caliber, it seems like the 500 Nitro Express would be the most popular. Is that your assessment?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, because when you start getting into the real bigger than that, the rifles are just too darn heavy, and they're very specialized, hard to get ammo, and we're going to talk about the 577 Nitro Expresses later, and of all my PH friends, I only know two that carry a 577, and then they are built like they can take it. No, so Mr. Average, the 500 is probably the upper level of what's manageable, what's carryable, and sensible.
And so, of all of the guys that hunt with a double rifle in Africa, it would seem like the 470 is probably the most popular. Would you say the 450, 400 is number two, or the 500, or something else?
No, I think the 500 is more. Depending if you've got hunters or you've got PHs. I think with PHs, the 500 is more popular. I think with clients, the 450, 400 is probably more popular.
And with PHs, I know there's a lot of overlap in this too. Guys that carry a double and mainly specialize in buffalo, would you say the 470 is more popular? And then for the elephant guys, the 500 is more popular?
Yes, yeah, I would think so.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the 470. Because ammo is just more readily available. And then the 470's got an aura about it. We have spoken about it at length before. I think it makes a good PHS rifle because the bullet is larger diameter than a 500 and 458 bullet, so it's a better stopping rifle when compared to 450 Nitro Express. But as I mentioned before, from a hunting perspective, where clients are hunting and they need a bit more penetration for elephants with head up, I think the 450 is a better choice over the 470.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense, and we have talked about that. So, of all of these cartridges we're going to talk about today, the 500 is certainly the one that is easiest to get ammo for right now, factory ammo for. Federal, Hornady, Nosler all make 500 Nitro Express ammo. You can get it from the company Inyati as well, and also no, Buffalo Boar does. Buffalo Boar makes a lot of this stuff, surprisingly to me, but not 500 Nitro Express. So you have, options are limited for this stuff, and everything that you're going to find is expensive, but it is at least attainable, which is not the case with most of this other stuff we're talking about today.
Yes, yeah. And those guys reload as well, So, but if you're a pitch, you carry your rifle a lot, but you don't shoot it all that often. Well, you're not supposed to shoot it all that often, So, I had when I bought my 505 Gibbs, I came with 300 original Gibbs cartridges, and those cartridges lasted me 20 years, So you carry a rifle a lot, but if you go through a whole season and shoot it, 20 shots in a whole season, it's a lot, So the objective of a PH is not to shoot his client's trophy for him, but just to sort out the mess. So the good PHs try and shoot as little as possible.
Well, speaking of cartridges that you shot as a PH from time to time, let's talk about your old standby, the 505 Gibbs, and your favorite rifle.
I love affair with that rifle, man. Well, it saved my life a couple of times, so you've got to enjoy it. I did mention when I originally purchased the rifle, it came with 300 original Gibbs cartridges, and I burnt my farm down with the first one that I shot, and I chronographed quite a few of them, and no ways, all the factory ammo said it was, all the stated ballistics said it was a 525 grain bullet doing 2,300 feet per second. Well, I chronographed about a dozen of those loads, and they weren't doing anywhere near 2,300 feet per second. And that's even from my rifle at a 25.5-inch barrel. They were doing exactly 2,150 feet per second with amazing consistency. So, but I was never really happy with the 525 grain bullet of the .505 because it has a sectional density of 0.294, which I thought was too low. But as soon as 600 grain bullets came along, and the 600 grain bullet of a 505 Gibbs has a sectional density of 0.336, which is right up there where it should be. and my carry load, it just happened to work out at 2,140 feet per second, and I carried that for most of my career, and that combination never let me down. I did say once before, it knocked an elephant over, and I would shoot buffalo going away on the tail, and they just dropped to the shot. That was just an absolute manageable rifle. And my rifle, I had it restocked. It was a Dumillon, which was a custom Belgian gun, but I had it stocked by an old Rigby stock maker. So it had a sort of a Rigby style stock on it, and that rifle just pointed beautifully, it carried nicely, and everybody could shoot it. I once took Olivia Angeles on, which is now Tom Opry's wife, on a buffalo hunt in Mozambique. I mean, she's a real tiny little girl, and she shot my rifle no problem at all. And when I was training PHs, every PH that I used to train, and I was at the PH school in South Africa and at the South African Wildlife College, every one person that passed in my hands, I gave them the opportunity to shoot my 505, and there was not a person that couldn't shoot it, and didn't knock anybody over, didn't tear anybody's rotator cuff ligaments in their shoulders. Everybody could shoot it, and it was fun. And it's to do with the velocity of a big bullet going relatively slowly and a relatively long barrel of 25.5 inches. The impulse duration, that's the duration of recoil, is substantially longer, and that's what makes the rifle just shootable. And even though it was recoiling at about 90 foot-pounds of recoil energy at 22 feet per second, it was manageable. I never shot the rifle off the bench. I always shot it standing, even if I was developing loads or sighting it in. I always used the standing bench, or would shoot off shooting sticks with my right elbow supported. And shooting that rifle off the bench was unpleasant. But I mean, 90 foot-pounds of recoil is almost double what the recommended value is. So you can understand it's a substantial amount of recoil. But when you're hunting, you don't notice the recoil. So it's only when you're trying to sight your rifle in or develop a load that you notice the recoil.
Tell me again how heavy your rifle was.
That was when it was 12 pounds when it had loaded with 4 cartridges. So empty was just over 11 pounds, and then when it was fully loaded, it was just under 12. Yeah, no, I think I might have told the story. When I was at the Wildlife College, I got the opportunity to do an autopsy on a very old lion. There was a safari camp close by to where the Wildlife College was, and one morning a couple didn't appear for breakfast, so the manager went to see what had happened, and when he got there, he found there was an old lion lying in front of their tent, and they couldn't get out of their tent because this lion was lying. This lion was very emaciated and looking in a terrible condition, so he shot the lion, and he brought the lion to the Wildlife College, and I did an autopsy on it. And it was pitiful. We've spoken about lions before, and no old lion has an honorable death. And this lion was basically starving. And in his stomach was a kilogram, that's 2.5 pounds of porcupine quills. There was nothing but porcupine quills in his stomach.
Ooh.
And he was riddled with TB. And a couple of weeks after I'd done the autopsy, I developed a cough, and I thought, oh God, maybe I've got bloody tuberculosis. So I went and had my chest x-rayed, and the doctor said, no, your lungs are clear, but you don't realize that your shoulder, your right shoulder is stuffed, as he put it in very, very bluntly. So I'm very careful now about what I shoot, because I've basically got shoulder degeneration from a lifetime of sticking my arm up cows' backsides and shooting lots of shotgun shells and lots of big bore rifles. So, and that's the trouble with these heavy recoiling rifles that we're going to talk about now. It's all macho to go and shoot a rifle that produces 150 foot-pounds of recoil energy, but eventually that's going to do some damage to you. Either it's going to damage your shoulder, tear your rotator cuff, or worse still, but you detach your retina, which has happened to a friend of mine.
Yeah, I heard that Frederick Salou had what he called nerve damage to his shoulder from shooting his extremely heavy recoiling, very, very big bore, 4, 6, 8 bore rifles that he was shooting a long, long time ago with those massive balls, massive lead balls, and lots of black powder with it. So I have not suffered any of these ailments myself, but it is not hard for me to understand why that would be the case for those of you that are.
Yeah, I heard of Salute. Didn't he double load when he'd loaded the same barrel twice once and it recoiled and it knocked him off his horse and broke the stock of the rifle? I mean, there was some story like it. I can't remember exactly, but
I heard
he had a four-ball.
I heard he
Yeah.
shot both of his bore or both of the barrels on a double one time and had a similar incident like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they used to reload when they were riding horses. I've also heard an instance, I think when he loaded the same barrel twice or something. So,
Oof, goodness.
that would wake you up, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. But it sounds like your 505 Gibbs was very well suited for the role that you used it in as a emergency backup cartridge like that to get yourself and your clients out of sticky situations from time to time over there.
Oh, yes, very much so. And I love that rifle. And you get confidence in it as well, And even though it was a bolt action single barrel rifle, they say you can't stop a buffalo with a frontal chest shot. Well, I proved them that you can do that. That's one thing that I've shot two buffalo in the middle of the chest, and that stopped them for sure. So I very much doubt you would get the same effect if you'd used even a 4.58. But definitely that 50 cal, boy, that's a step up in stopping power. And yeah, I just loved it because I had confidence in it. And the last buffalo I had to shoot, I shot it at like 7 paces, and it just dropped to the shot.
Tell us the story of one of those buffalo chest shots, and then we'll move on to other cartridges.
Yeah, so when I was still a learner PH, we were in a place called Sapani Pan. We had a bunch of Danish clients, and the hunt was finished. And we were just going around game viewing, and we came to this waterhole called Sapani Pan, and there was a buffalo cow standing there with a snare around her neck. And all these clients were there just taking photographs. The next minute, we heard this rifle being cocked behind us, and it was our game scout, and he was carrying an AK-47, and we heard him cock his rifle. So we said, "What the hell are you doing?" He said, "No, this buffalo's got a snare around its neck. I'm going to shoot it." And there was a big ruddy-faced old Danish farmer called Bauer, and he said, "No, me shoot." So he offered to shoot it, so we couldn't make that decision, so we had to go and drive and go and find the warden of the Teresa Safari area. And we found the warden, and he said, "Listen, I'm prepared to pay for the shooting of this poor old buffalo cow that's got a snare around his neck." And that took a couple of hours. So by the time we got back to where the waterhole was, the cow wasn't there, but she was dragging the snare. So we followed her into the jets, and we found her standing there looking like she was about to fall over and expire. And of course, the old Bauer, this guy, he never had the opportunity. He didn't have a shot with the rifle. He had a 375 and it was loaded with a 300 grain solid. And Charles Krobler, who was my tutor PH, he said to me, "Kevin, this buffalo cow is going to charge us, and I want you to stop it." And how he knew that it was going to charge us, I didn't know. But anyway, so there were 4 of us standing in a line, and we put old Bauer in the middle, and Charles Krobler stood on his right-hand side, I stood on his left, and then the old game scout was standing there, and old Bauer got down on his knee in very classical style with his elbow like a target rifle style, and he shoots this old buffalo cow behind the shoulder. And as you know, all the Continentals always shoot an animal behind the shoulder. And this buffalo, just from looking like he was about to fall over and died any minute, just was galvanized into the most vicious charge. And she just turned and came for us. Once she was pretty close, probably 30 or 40 meters away. And we were all standing in a little clearing. And as she sort of came into the clearing and at full speed, she sort of hesitated in sort of mid-stride because there were 4 of us standing in a line who obviously didn't know which one to go for. And as she sort of hesitated, I shot her slap in the middle of the chest with my 505. And it was like he ran into a brick wall. You could actually visibly see her. I shot her with an expanding bullet. You could actually see her chest sort of just cave in. And as it did that, 2 about a meter long squirts of blood came out of each nostril. And she just recoiled back from that, took a couple of steps forward towards us and just fell over. And when I did an autopsy on it, that shot of mine had shot her through her heart, and the hole through her heart I could put my fist through it. So that just killed her instantly. And it just blew a hole the size of a cricket ball through her heart. I mean, it was just amazing. And even my tutor PhD used to carry a 404, and he would say, "Wow, he just never seen perform it like that before. And it was, yeah, so that was the start of a 30-year love affair with that rifle for sure.
Yeah, man, that is darn impressive. And it's funny how certain cartridges also get a little bit of allure about them too. Someone writes about them or something like that, and you had that with, as we discussed last time I had you on the show with Robert Rourke and Harry Selby and the 416 Rigby. Well, the 505 Gibbs, not quite that popular, but Ernest Hemingway certainly did his part with it with the
God have your life of Francis Macumber.
That's right, yeah. Old PH Robert Wilson in that story. Yeah.
Ruddy-faced PH, they called him. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, no, so, and we're going to talk about the 500 Jeffries next, and I just definitely think that there's no comparison. The 505 Gibbs, I much preferred it to the 500 Jeffries.
Now, before we move on to the 500 Jeffrey, I'm going to share an excerpt with you from a previous interview Kevin and I did, episode 177, talking about elephant hunting. This particular story features both the 505 Gibbs with Kevin and a 500 Nitro Express in the hands of another hunter. So here is that story.
Anyway, we were hunting in the Tirara Safari area. That's an area that's against Lake Kariba. And the area was known as a bull elephant area. And it was just him, this farmer, myself, and we had the farmer in our area was the cameraman. And in 4 days, we looked over 127 different bull elephants. I mean, there were just bull elephants everywhere. Until we found an enormous giant of an elephant. Elephants are a bit like humans. You get 5 foot tall humans and you get 7 foot tall humans, and you get 5 foot tall elephants and you get 7 foot tall elephants. And this elephant stood head and shoulders above the rest. And because of that, his ivory didn't look all that impressive, but it was a massive bull. And I was just there as an observer. So I was standing with my 505 over my shoulder. And this guy, the elephants, there were about 5 elephants in a group, and they were all just sleeping in the shade of a not big baobab tree. And this guy tapped his ear hole with his forefinger, indicating that he was going to take a side brain shot. And he just walked up to this elephant, and it was quite amazing. I mean, he was absolutely fearless when it came to elephants. I mean, almost to the point of arrogance. I was very much a learner, and I was apprehensive about being really close to elephants. But this guy had no fear whatsoever about elephants. I mean, he would walk in amongst them, and so there was 5 or 6 bulls all sleeping under bulls, standing in the shade, just flapping their ears. So he walked up exactly side on to this massive big bull elephant and got to about 20 meters from it. And he's the guy that taught me how to hunt elephants. He said from side on, for the side brain shot, you aim on the elephant's eye, and then you move that gives you the level. Then you swing your point of aim to the bottom of what we call the ear hole gusset. The ear hole of an elephant looks like a little fanny. It's got a V-shaped, and that's because the elephant's ear hole goes into if you shoot him in his ear hole, it goes into the back third of the brain. And the back third of the brain is where the locomotory function is. So he just walked up to this elephant, and at 20 meters or so, he just raised his beautiful 500 Rigby, and he fired off a shot. And we were all just expecting the elephant I was expecting the elephant just to fall down. And that elephant just took off absolutely running. I mean, from being asleep to Usain Bolt in a flat sprint within a second. And he shouted, "Back me!" But by then, didn't even have my rifle loaded. I was just standing there as an observer. Anyway, he put in a backing shot, and then he set off running after this bull. As I've said before, this bod of mine is not made for running in the bush. But while he was running, he was so practiced, he managed to reload another 2 cartridges in his double. And I just started running off after him, and I heard another 2 bang, bang. And then I was just running they disappeared into the bush. I was just running, following the sound. And as I broke into a clearing, I saw this massive bull turn. And now the cameraman was running with him. And he fired 2 backing shots. And as the bull turned with its head up, he gave it another 2 frontal brain shots with his 500. And then they had absolutely no effect. That elephant put his head down, and it charged the cameraman. Because I don't think the elephant saw Finn, the guy's name. He was sort of partly his outline was probably broken by a bush. But the cameraman was standing out in the open, filming this whole thing. And he shouted to me, "I'm out." And I didn't really know what he meant by "I'm out," but the cameraman was busy filming, and this elephant just put his head down and came straight for this cameraman. But the cameraman didn't realize, I think through the viewfinder of the camera, how close that damn elephant was. And when he looked up, that elephant was really close to him. But from where I was standing, it was a quartering frontal shot, and you cannot shoot an elephant, or you're not really supposed to shoot an elephant on a quartering frontal shot, because if you go for a brain shot on a quartering frontal shot, the tusk of an elephant's tusk goes up behind its eye. So to get to the brain from a quartering frontal angle, you have to shoot to the base of the tusk. Also, on a quartering frontal angle, the humerus bone, which is the forearm bone, covers the heart. Now, elephants' long bones are solid, for all intents and purposes, solid. You know, we like to eat marrow bones. So all the long bones in humans and cattle, they've got a marrow cavity in them. Elephants do not have marrow cavities in their long bones. Their long bones are solid. An elephant's head is a giant honeycomb. And all the bone marrow that an elephant needs to create its red blood cells is in its head. It's not in its leg bones like it is in humans or other animals. So the only shot that I had was at this elephant's forearm, and I shot it with a 525 grain Goodnell monolithic solid, and that bullet was doing 2,250 feet per second. And it was quite amazing. If you look at an elephant from the front, its legs are vertical, straight up and down. And as I just shot him on this shoulder, or basically on his forearm, and the elephant just stopped, and his whole front leg bent at a 15-degree angle. You could see his whole bend, just bent it, and he stood there where that shot anchored him. And the elephant just stood there screaming with his leg out at an awkward angle. And all of a sudden, blood started to squirt out of his bloody trunk, and that covered the cameraman in blood, because, I mean, it was that close. It turns out that the guy that had the 500 didn't have any more cartridges. He'd run out of cartridges. He was only hunted with 4 cartridges. So I was about to run up and shoot the elephant again, and then he said, "No, hang on." Just then one of the trackers arrived, and he had a rucksack with some more ammunition in it. And this guy got 2 more cartridges, put them into his double, ran right up to the elephant, virtually stuck the muzzle of his 500 into the elephant's ear hole and pulled the trigger, and eventually the elephant came down.
My goodness.
So if you've got a copy of my original perfect shot, there's some pictures of the bullets. The bullet that I fired is the second one from the left. That's that Goodnell monolithic solid. The next 2 bullets, you can see they are totally deformed. One of them's, those are the 2 that came out of that elephant's head. I couldn't understand why that elephant, those shots didn't work. So I took a great care to dissect that elephant. And the 2 bullets that came out of that elephant's head had deformed like that. So the shots looked like they were all perfectly placed, but those bullets deformed. And because they deformed, they didn't penetrate in a straight line. They were just curved like bananas round the elephant's brain. So you got 1 side brain shot and 2 frontal brain shots with a 570 grain bullet, and that had no effect on that animal whatsoever. So a short time thereafter, Paul Roberts from Rigby came to visit me, and I took him on a bird hunt. And I had these bullets that I recovered, and I said, I couldn't understand it. Look at these bullets. Why did this happen? And he said, you must remember that when Carnock made bullets, they would make batches of them and store them. So that ammunition was put together in 1963. So this is in the late 1980s. So that ammunition was 25 years old. But he said it was not inconceivable, but the bullets that were used to load those into that ammunition could have been made 20 or even 30 years before that. So those bullets were probably 50 to 60 years old. And because there's 3 different metals in that bullet, there's lead, obviously, then there's a metal jacket, then there's a copper wash. There's electrolytic action between the different metals, which basically those bullets had metal fatigue. And that's why they deformed in the way that they did.
Okay, this is John again. I hope you enjoyed that story. Now let's jump right back into the most recent interview with Kevin about these bigger bore cartridges, and we'll pick up with the 500 Jeffrey where we left off a minute ago. Well, it seems like the 500 Jeffrey is given very similar ballistics to the 505 Gibbs. It's a .510 bullet instead of .505 like the Gibbs, and a little bit different bullet weights, but in the same realm. But it's also a rebated rim cartridge. And it seemed like it was never not that the 505 Gibbs was an extremely popular cartridge, but it seemed like the 500 Jeffrey was not as popular as the Gibbs.
Yeah, I think the downfall was that rebated rim, because it really takes a specialized gunsmith or a gun making company to make a 500 Jeffries feed really well with a rebated rim. And they did that because I think they just, I forget what action that fits into, but it's very difficult to get it to feed reliably. And with a bolt action rifle, the dangerous game rifle, that thing's got to be 100% reliable with feeding and extraction. And I never had a problem with my 505 with any feeding problems at all, and that fed smoothly, and that big old cartridge would just slip in there nice and easily. But definitely, I have heard guys have had problems with the 500 Jeffries because of the rebated rim.
I know a guy, some of the listeners probably know him, Adam Weiss, Hootie Hoo on YouTube. He has a Sacco 85 and 500 Jeffrey, and he says that rifle is just absolutely brutal to shoot. He's a real big guy, kind of like you, and he says that when he shoots it, like the trigger guard slaps his finger and stuff too, and he says it's just, he bought one on a lark. I think he said he was at a gun store and someone had sold it to the person that owned the gun store, and they had it on sale, and that person probably sold it because it wasn't fun to shoot, and so he bought it on a lark and just has it. And he says he's probably never going to hunt with it because it's just no fun to shoot. But there's a big difference between a Sacco 85 and a Dumoulin Mauser like yours, though.
Even the Sacco 375s, they're notoriously light, and they're not. I don't think those Scandinavian countries have experience with building double, big bore rifles, dangerous game rifles. The Brits got it right. They say the handy qualities of a double are magical, but with a really good bolt action rifle like a Rigby or a Wesley Richard or Holland and Holland, you can get those rifles to handle like a double, because there's something about them that they just handle so beautifully. It's the balance. It's just the way that they put together. And with my 505, on a bet, I once shot a clay out of the air with it, and I won myself a case of beer. So, and because I reckon, when you get charged, you don't have time to shoot them in your rifle. You point it like a shotgun, and I could do that with my 505 after carrying it for 30 years.
Yes, I did not have nearly the experience with your 505 that you did. I just held it that one time. We were at the Conroe Taxidermy together, but even just holding it for 30 seconds there, I could understand what you were talking about with this rifle being very well balanced, and it fit me well, and the bolt action was very smooth on it. Everything about it, I can understand why you like that rifle so much.
Yeah, it's a bit like your wife. You get to know them after a while, and and it just. I just loved it. I was sad to sell it, but I would never wanted to shoot it again, because the last thing I want to do is go and have a shoulder replacement. That's for sure.
Well, let's talk about a couple of A squared cartridges here. We talked a little bit about the 500 A square to start off with. Tell us about the 495 A squared.
Yeah, so basically the 500 A square is just the 460 Weatherby case, necked out to 0.510, but that whole overall cartridge length of that cartridge is 3.74 inches long, which is massive. So the 500 A square was that same case, just slightly shortened. Then they shortened the case length to 2.8 inches, so the overall cartridge length was 3.6 inches, just to make it a bit more manageable in some of the actions. It was never really popular, but it was a brute of a cartridge, shooting 570 grain bullet, same also 0.510 caliber at 2,450 feet per second, which is substantially more than the same bullet out of the 500 Nitro Express, and that's 300 feet per second faster than out of the 500 Nitro. So, and that's just brutal. You know, that 11-pound rifle can recoil at 100 foot-pounds of free recoil energy at 24. So I mean, that's teeth-rattling stuff. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Never really popular. You know, then all A-Square went through a whole lot of, I don't know, whether political problems or some financial problems. You know, so the A-Square the cartridges that he designed were good, but they were never really popular. And the only one that's really quite popular is the 500 A-Square.
Yeah, it seemed like A Squared was a company that had a flame that burned very brightly for a short period of time, and then they had some financial problems, and then Art Alphen had some health problems with him and his wife that, you know, kind of took him out of the game there for a while. And I hear he's doing better now, but his company is, as far as I know, unfortunately gone by the wayside, and so all of this stuff associated with them is no longer the case too. Like we talked about the 416 Taylor last time we were on, that was another A Squared invention, and I'm sure that was something that they made ammo for back in the day, but don't anymore.
Yeah, I got to know him quite well because he once invited me to the SHOT Show and to be in his booth, and he wanted someone to talk on African caliber. So I spent the whole duration of the SHOT Show in the A booth, which was a real interesting time. You know, I got to know Art quite well. He was certainly a brilliant ballistician. You know, I've got a personalized signed copy of his book, you know, Any Shot You Want. I don't know. Have you got a copy, John?
I do not, believe it or not. I think I need to fix that, though.
Yeah, no, it's a really good book. And then the pictures, and he describes his coil check stock and his animal rifle in this book quite substantially. If you've got that little copy of my real Buffalo book, and there's a picture there. I've got a picture of a Hannibal rifle there as well, which I call a shooting rifle, but not a lousy carrying rifle. But yeah, so I'll ask him. So he's a really brilliant ballistician, and I really learned a lot from him about ballistics and bullet performance and stuff like that. And he was the first guy that sort of came out with with monolithic solids, and he had another bullet called a Dead Tough, and he had another bullet called a Lion Load. Now he was way ahead of his time when it came to seriously ballistics and boosting bullets that performed really well on dangerous game.
Yeah, so I may have mentioned this before in maybe an interview with you, or maybe just talking about Africa in general, but I didn't get to know him, but I became familiar with Art Alphen back when I was a cadet at West Point. Back in the 1980s, I think he was an instructor there in the history department back when he was a captain, and he made a series of videos demonstrating the capabilities and shortcomings of a bunch of different weapons used by the military for a long time, going back to the Civil War and then moving forward through breech loaders and the trench shotgun in World War I and submachine guns and all of this stuff. And so I remember watching these videos even 20 years after he made them in history class as a cadet, and clearly the guy really knew what the heck he was talking about, and the videos were good production quality for the time that they were made, but the information on them is still just A+. And I think they're actually on YouTube to this day. So those that want to know what I'm talking about can look him up and see some of this stuff. There's actually a video where he talks about, I think it was the trench shotgun, the 1897 trench shotgun, where he talked about using that in combat in Africa. And I've always wondered what the heck the story was with that, because I wonder if he was in Mozambique in 1975 or something like that.
Yeah, I know Jeff Cooper was involved in the Zimbabwe Bush War. I don't know if Art ever got there, but he was certainly around that time, definitely, you know. So, no, I liked him. I enjoyed spending time because he was so knowledgeable on, excuse me.
Well, we got a couple of more Art Alphen cartridges or A Squared cartridges coming up here in a second. But before we get to that, let's talk about this 550 Magnum cartridge. I've never heard of it before until you mentioned it in our preparation for this interview.
Yeah, there's a well-known South African PH called Jason van Aarde, and he has one. So basically what it is, it's the 460 Weatherby case, just nicked up to take a .550 caliber bullet. So it just looks like an overgrown 458 Win Mag cartridge because it's absolutely parallel-sided, straight-walled. The cartridge headspace is on the rim, and it shoots a 700 grain .550 caliber bullet. And Jason's load, he shoots at a 2,000 240 feet per second, which is as you can imagine, is quite a substantial ballistic combination. His particular rifle, which was made by a guy called Kevin Henley in Brookfontein Custom Rifles in South Africa, it's made on a I think it's a ZK 602 action, and his load is the rifle weighs 11.4 pounds, and his load is 113 grains of a powder called S335, which is quite a relatively fast burning South African powder. And that gives him a velocity of 2,240 feet per second. But that rifle, I crunched all the numbers. That rifle recoils at 122 foot-pounds of free recoil energy at 26 feet per second. So that is substantial. That is like shooting three 10-pound 375s at the same time.
Huh.
That's the amount of energy. That's what you're talking about. But you can imagine he can handle it. He says, but I mean, he writes. There's a blog that he's written about it with animals he shot with it, and that's just, you can imagine that weight of bullet going that fast. That's absolutely bloody deadly. He's got some people. He mainly shoots solids because to get people to make expanding type bullets for that. But with new CNC machines and laser cutting, it's quite easy just to cut a .55 caliber bullet, and he's used it for a number of seasons. It's his carrier rifle, and he uses it. He says it just works really well. He loves it. He's sorry that it's not more popular, but and quite easy to make, really. You just take a 460 Weatherby case and you just neck it out to 5.5 inches. I mean, 0.55 inches.
Yeah, I mean, the 460 Weatherby is a very fat case to begin with, and then you take all the shoulder out of it, and man, did you say 113 grains of powder? Did I hear you right?
113 grains of powder, yeah.
Whew, man.
But that's quite a fast burning powder. When I used to reload from my 505, my load was 120 grains of Hodgson's 4831 shortcut. So, I mean, these cartridges, you don't load many cartridges out of a tin of powder. That's for
No, not at all. Yeah, you have a picture in Africa's Most Dangerous of a guy shooting a 550 Magnum, and there's quite a bit of muzzle climb on it.
Yeah, one of the, I don't know what it was, but I mean, the rifle, when I shot it, the rifle was actually vertical. The recoil just made it go vertical.
Yeah. Well, let's step up in caliber, but way down in powder to the very old 577 Snyder. Very old cartridge. It seems somewhat akin to our old 5070 Government from back in the day, with the kind of an initial iteration of a breech-loading black powder round like that. Real big bore, heavy bullet, not going very fast. You have 480 grains.
Yeah, absolutely obsolete. Yeah, it was developed from the breech-loading version of the old Enfield musket. I mean, wasn't the Enfield musket used in the American Civil War?
It was, yeah. So
shot 180 grain bullet doing 250 feet per second. Real, terrible energy, much momentum. Good, probably for shooting humans, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's cutting edge. 150 years ago, and big step up in power for capability and whatnot, being able to quickly reload a breech-loading rifle like that. And it is funny, you said from the Enfield musket, because, I mean, our old quote-unquote trapdoor Springfield was from the old Springfield musket, which was also used in the Civil Wars. You take those two muzzle loaders and modify them a little bit so you could turn them into a breech loader and put a real low-pressure cartridge in them, and it works, and then everything kind of stems from there. I imagine it'd be all right for Plains game and anything else, and I'm sure guys killed buffalo and whatnot with them back in the day, and I'm sure they had all kinds of problems from time to time on them too.
Yeah, but I mean, just obviously, I've never seen one. I've never even shot one, so can't really comment on that,
So were there still Martini Henrys and 577 450 floating around when you were over there?
Oh, yes, definitely. It was very popular, I mean, that was the stalwart of the world in South Africa, I've shot a few. Rather brutal because they had steel butt plates. They weren't very shooter-friendly. And Yeah, there's some guys still hunt with them. There's sort of quite a large following of traditionalists that like to go and still hunt with Martini Henrys and stuff like that. But there's no real dangerous game application. The ballistics just weren't there. But certainly, as effective against Homo sapiens, it was an extremely effective cartridge. Even during the Anglo-Boer War, some of the old Afrikaners, they preferred their Martini Henrys to the 1896 Mauser in sort of 7mm, 7x57. So it was certainly a very effective cartridge, you can imagine. But black powder, so every time you shot, everybody could see where you were shooting from and stuff like that. But some of the old farmers, those old Boers, they loved that rifle and they stuck with it throughout the duration of the Boer War.
So I actually have a Martini Henry, and I took it on my first hunt to Africa back in 2006. I shot a kudu and
I remember that, yeah.
Kudu and a warthog with it. It worked very well. I wouldn't even try and shoot a buffalo with it. It was quite a process getting all of the ammo and everything together with it. I'm trying to remember. It's been almost 20 years ago now. I think got custom brass made out of, I want to say 28 gauge shotgun shells, and then had custom bullets made. I think it was .462 or .463 diameter, because it was one of those weird bore diameters where if you tried to use a .458 caliber bullet on it, it wouldn't, oftentimes you wouldn't get very good accuracy. And I think we were using 400 grain bullets going 1,400 feet per second, something like that, with a smokeless load. And it shot great. Very, very accurate. That was actually a custom rifle. I want to say that Jeffrey made that rifle, custom for some British officer way back in the day. And my dad came across it, and that was at my college graduation present, and took it to Africa. And like I said, it worked well on that kudu and that warthog, and a springbok I shot with it too. But we recovered the bullet from the kudu, and that bullet did not expand at all. Like, it just kind of peeled away one of the sides a little bit. So even with the thin jacket that we had ordered for it and whatnot, at 1,400 feet per second, it still wasn't going fast enough for any expansion. But I mean, everything I killed with it, I recovered, and it was fine. But it's just interesting, the problems that you run into sometimes with a really old gun like that, trying to adapt it.
And what was the shooting distance of the kudu, John?
100 yards, something like that. Not very far.
Yeah. So your impact velocity is probably 1,100 or so feet per second, I should imagine, almost, that's probably why, those big old bullets with terrible ballistic coefficient probably slow down like crazy, so.
Yeah. And that was, when I was not nearly as, well read and well versed on things like impact velocity and all that. And that was definitely a good lesson of that deal. I almost wonder if we would have had better results with maybe a cast lead bullet instead, and just use a softer pure lead bullet like that instead of trying to go with the jacketed projectile.
Yeah, probably. I think, those original Martini Henry bullets were paper patch lead bullets, weren't they? So.
Yeah, I actually have one right here, and yes, an old Kynoch box of them. And I want to, these are the cavalry loads for the carbine, so they're a 410 grain bullet. But yeah, just plain old lead bullet. And like you said, probably, I have no doubt that they were extremely effective on people.
I'm sure. Yeah, for sure. No, but they just leave a massive hole and lots of knockdown power, and that soft lead would just be terribly sort of more massive terminal wind channels and terminal bullet performance.
I'll bet one of those would be very interesting to use on a leopard or something like that.
And even a lion as well would work really well, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, let's move up a little bit more to the 5.77 Black Powder Express. So, cartridge from the same time period as the 5.77 Snyder, also black powder cartridge, also not going that fast. I imagine this was something that was kind of along the lines of the 500 Black Powder Express. That was probably very popular, very effective in India, but probably not quite enough juice for really good use in Africa.
Yeah, I should imagine on targets and stuff like that, that would be extremely effective with that point .585 diameter bullet, and even a relatively low sectional density. It came out with a 520 and to a 650 grain bullet, and then the sectional density of the 520 grain is only 0.217, and the 650 grain 0.271. So you've got a large diameter, low sectional density bullet going relatively slowly. It must have been extremely effective on the thin-skinned cats, but I wouldn't shoot anything else thick-skinned with that. Not with those not with those statistics, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I imagine that was probably not something that you hardly ran into at all when you were over there.
I've never seen one. No, it's absolutely obsolete during my lifetime out in Africa for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's a big step going from black powder to smokeless powder, and in that vein, you take a very similar size case, put smokeless powder in it, and you have a 5.77 nitro, which is really hauling the mail, though.
And that's had a really fantastic elephant reputation. There was a guy called Sutherland. I mean, he was one of the most famous elephant hunters, and he used a pair of 5.77s. That was sort of your get out of trouble card, get out of jail free card was the 5.77. And that's a 750 grain bullet being 2,050 feet per second. So 7,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, momentum value of 220, and a knockout value of 129. I mean, this is real stopping power. And of all of my PHs all the PH friends that I know of only two that carry a 5.77. One guy's a guy called Cliff Walker, very well-known Zimbabwe PH. I mean, he's a brute of a man and very strong and powerful, and he can handle it. And the other one is a friend of mine called Cole Stumphy, who hunts in Namibia. Also a big guy, Cole, and one of his rifles is a 5.77. And I think they just use those rifles for if they really need some extra stopping power. If you've got a wounded elephant or something like that. But the truth be told, with a 13-pound rifle, to carry one of those all day on an extended hunt, boy, you've got to be physically capable of doing it. And then the recoil as well. The rifle like that, if that rifle weighs 13 pounds, that's going to free recoil energy is 128 foot-pounds of free recoil energy at 25 feet per second. I mean, that's a substantial recoil. That's more than 375 of shooting at the same time. So you don't do that too often. But maybe there are some situations where you need it. But we're now getting into the realm of not really practical. I believe it's just too damn heavy.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of not very practical and all of that stuff, I think Mark Sullivan carried a 5.77 nitro as well in a lot of his videos.
That was just for showmanship for sure,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he could have done what he was doing with a 450 nitro or even a 500. He didn't need to go to that big,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with the 5.77, we had different sizes of it. You had the 2 3/4, the 3-inch, the 3 3.25 inch. That was for the black powder stuff. And was it as simple as taking those same case lengths and loading smokeless powder?
They just used the same case.
Yeah, same case.
I think they just made the same case a bit.
Put cordite in it.
More, thicker. And the 3-inch version. So the 500 nitro, the 5.77, it's a 3-inch case.
Okay.
But that's a massive bullet. And it just works. First of all, the rifles are really expensive. To buy a quarter of 5.77, you're going to really pay a premium. The ammo is probably quite hard to get hold of and probably ridiculously expensive, but then you don't shoot it all that much. But also, I just think for the average modern day PH, it's just too damn heavy to carry it. When the 5.77 was in its heyday, Africa had gun bearers, and you had a gun bearer that carried it for you. And quite often those old elephant hunters, they would carry the rifle in its case. So the gun bearer would carry it in its case, and if they happened to wound an elephant and it got away, then he would open the case and take it out and, use it, sort out the problem and put it back in its case, and the gun bearer would carry the case all the way back to camp. But the days of gun bearers in Africa are long gone now. You're expected to, the PH carries his own rifle, and even a client is expected to carry his own rifle. So this is where a 13-pound rifle is not fun to carry for 10 or 12 hours a day, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Well, kind of in that same vein, we have the 5.77 T-Rex. So we're back into the A squared stuff. Let's talk about it a little bit.
I'm sure you've seen all those Middle Eastern gentlemen shooting these rifles, that he shoots it and the rifle flies out his hand and breaks the window behind him and stuff like that. And you can understand why, because you're now shooting at, the T-Rex is it's the same bullet as the 500 Nitro Express, but that thing's going at 2,450 feet per second, which is exactly 400 feet per second faster than the same bullet out of a 500 Nitro Express. So now you're in the realms of 10,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Momentum is 260,000 feet per second, and a KO of 152. So in a 12-pound rifle, which is about what such a rifle will weigh, your free recoil energy is 190 foot-pounds at 32 feet per second. So that's the reason why those rifles fly out of the guy's hands and knock them over and stuff like that. Because that's break your rotator cuff. That's just ridiculous, really. There's absolutely no reason to have a rifle like that other than for a novelty and just to knock the shit out of your friends. Put it that way.
Yeah. There's a interview on YouTube with David Petzel talking with Art Alphen about the 5.77 T-Rex, and they have one of these rifles. It's an interesting discussion. I encourage people to check it out. But I think he was saying in it, it's been a little while since I've seen this video, but I think he was saying in it that he had maybe 3, maybe 4 mercury recoil reducers in it, and then it made it really heavy and all that. And he kept trying to ask him how much recoil energy it had in it, and he would not answer the question, but he would just say, you can't measure it just like you would a normal rifle because of all of this stuff. And so but the proof is in the pudding when you see these videos of the people shooting it and then what happens to them.
Yeah, no, that does knock you backwards. That's a novelty, but there's no practical hunting application for that, none whatsoever.
Well, let's talk about another cartridge in this. Oh, actually, back up a second. Do you know what the parent case was for the 5.77 T-Rex? Was it the 5.77 Nitro?
I think it was the 5.77 modified 5.77 Nitro. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so,
I think it's very similar to the 4.58 Inyati, and that uses a modified 5.77 Nitro Express case. Oh.
All right. Well, I
think they do. They turn the rim off or something. I don't really know, but you start looking at these things and looking at them, you just say, well, this is just crazy, because you're not going to be able to shoot it. If you do, you'll shoot one shot, and then your recovery time, it takes you so long to come out of recoil to recycle the ball to get a second shot off. It's just ridiculous. The 5.85 Inyati, it's the same bullet, and then the velocity varied from 2,000 to 2,400 feet per second. So I pull out 5.85 Inyati loads are basically mimicking what the 5.77 T-Rex does. It's just 11-pound rifle, or even at the slowest velocity, you're looking at 145 foot-pounds of free recoil energy at 9 feet per second, which is, I believe, almost unmanageable for Mr. Average, for sure.
Yeah, and there's a massive difference going from 2,000 to 2,400 feet per second with a bullet that heavy, too. Jeez.
For sure. Yeah, because your energy is on the square of the city. So you square 2,000 and you square 2,400. There's a massive difference.
Well, let's talk about a cartridge that's not quite as ridiculous, and it's a lot older, in the 600 Nitro Express. 900 grain bullet at around 2,000 feet per second. So not going quite as fast, but massive bullet here.
Massive amount of energy, depending on the velocity. Some of those old caught-out loads didn't even quite make 2,000 feet per second. And the reputation, a lot of the old elephant hunters preferred the 5.77 over the 600 because they reckon the 5.77 penetrated better. Which I don't really have any experience, but I've got a friend who is a professional hunter in South Africa, like the name of Jan Dumont. He's got a Heim in 600 Nitro Express, and his Heim weighs 14 pounds. I actually contacted him when we were preparing for this podcast and asked him what his double weighs, and it weighs 14 pounds. And if you do the math on that, the free recoil energy of of that rifle shooting a 600 grainer at 2,050 feet per second is 94 foot-pounds at 21 feet per second of free recoil energy. So that's manageable. That's not that's slightly more than my 505 Gibbs, and he mainly uses it as his backup for when he gets into a dangerous, wounded buffalo situation. And now you can imagine that sort of ballistics is absolutely devastating if you shoot it well. And 14-pound rifle is a lot heavier than a 12-pound rifle. You have to carry that all day, that's for sure. But he seems to like it, and he has good success with it. But certainly, I wouldn't rush out and buy one. That's for sure.
So it's funny that you mentioned that in African Rifles and Cartridges in the 600 Nitro Express section. John Taylor talks about it, and he says, I had an American friend who used one in days gone by. He told me that on one occasion his hands and arms were so cramped and tired from carrying it that when at last offered a shot, he simply could not take it. He said that he had to rest for an appreciable time, during which period he several times tried to aim but just couldn't make it. He was foolish because since he hadn't been following a wounded beast, there had been no need for him to have been carrying a 600 all day. He ought to have been carrying his lighter weapon and only taken over the 600 when at last closing his quarry. But that's when you have a gun bearer like that. So yeah, I mean, 14 pounds, that's one thing, carrying it 50 yards from your truck to the bench to shoot it. And it's, something else if you're carrying it miles and miles.
Yeah, no. So those are the days you had a specific gun bearer, so you didn't wear yourself out. But some of the 600s weighed more than that. They weighed 15 or 16 pounds.
Well, let's talk about another 600 and the 600 Overkill.
I shot the 600 Overkill. This rifle had a muzzle brake on the end of the barrel. It was an American hunting rifles, Wayne Jacobson. He makes a beautiful rifle, and it's just a straight watered belted case that fits into the 505 Gibbs belt bolt face. It actually fits to a CZ 550 action, so it's probably about as big as you can go on a 550 action. The straight case with the belted rim. You shot that thing. Oh my God! It was an interesting experience, but one of those things you do it once and you say, okay, that was nice, but never again. I just don't see any practical solution, but because the blast from that muzzle brake was dust threw up everywhere. The rifle rises almost vertically in recoil. That Overkill shooting a 900 grain 0.62 620 inch caliber bullet at 2,400 feet per second. I mean, there's a reason why they call it the 600 Overkill, because that's a very appropriate name for it. That's for sure.
Yeah, so same diameter, same weight bullet as the 600 Nitro, but once again going 400 feet per second faster. I mean, it seems like it's just a showing off gun to see how powerful you can make something.
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting engineering and ballistic exercise, but honestly, no practical application. You say you can either use this or you're not free to go and hunt buffalo. I take my 9.3 every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's a novelty, complete novelty.
Yeah, there's people that are gun guys and just like tinkering with guns and enjoying that aspect of things, and there's people that just enjoy hunting and they see the rifle as a tool that they can use on the hunt, and they just don't care about it other than the fact that they want it to work and they want to be able to shoot it well and all that stuff. And aside from that, who cares? And then there's some sort of mixing in the middle. And so this is one of those cartridges, like some of these other ones we talked about today, that seem to lean more towards the people that really just enjoy the ridiculous gun side of things, just because it's fun to them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it's just a lot.
Oh, for sure. And then when we go to up next to the 700 Nitro Express, that's a classical example of that as well. Just too much of everything.
Well, go ahead and tell us about the 700 Nitro Express then.
The 700 Nitro Express was developed by a guy called Bill Feldstein, Jim Bell, because they went to Holland and wanted to make us a 600. They said, we signed an agreement, we'll make another 600. So well, okay, well, make me a 700. I mean, it would be nice to be in that sort of financial situation to do something like that. So they developed this completely new cartridge. It suits the 1,000 grain .7 caliber bullet with the sectional density is quite low at a 0.292 at 2,000 feet per second for 8,900 foot-pounds of muzzle energy at a momentum of 285 and a KO of 200. I mean, that's just, but in an 18-pound rifle, the free recoil energy is 178 foot-pounds at 25 feet per second. I mean, that's an 18-pound rifle. So some poor guy's got to carry, now we're talking 18 pounds instead of a 13 or a 14-pound double or even a 15-pound double. Now we've gone to 18 pounds, and my God, I would not like to carry an 18-pound rifle. It's just ridiculous. I've seen guys that have hunted with them, they make sort of like a cradle that's sort of like a leather strap that's got a cup that you put the rifle into. The rifle is held vertically, and then you take all the weight of it on your shoulders with this sort of modified bra type contraption that carries the rifle in a sort of cup that's sort of to a waist level. There's no real reason. Why would anybody do that when you could enjoy a hunt carrying a 10-pound rifle and hunt and kill an animal just as effectively with a 10-pound rifle as you one that weighs 18 pounds? Mm-hmm. But of all the cartridges that we've really discussed, I mean, the real practical ones, honestly, are the 500 Nitro, the 505 Gibbs, the 500 Jeffrey, and probably the 577. Those are probably the real practical ones. All these rest I believe, are just novelties.
And it seems like, with your experience using them yourself, seeing them used, people that you know use them, it seems like it's not just like numbers on paper too. It seems like there is like an actual, tangible, visible difference in impact shooting a buffalo or an elephant or whatever with these cartridges.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, and it's all to do with the knockout. I believe that knockout is very visible. Knockout is just momentum value times the diameter of the bullet, and definitely as you go up, you definitely see a difference. And even, I mean, we're talking about the 375. As you go up in bullet weight, so your momentum goes up, so your KO goes up, and that definitely is visible, definitely. So, and most of these calibers are all in the realm of the professional hunter. There's really little application from a sport hunting application to, unless you are hunting elephants. And elephants definitely, the 50 calibers really work well on elephants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a video that goes around somewhat frequently, and you've sent it to me, and I've seen it other places as well. A guy is shooting a buffalo, doesn't know he's there. I think he's using a 416 Remington. Doesn't make a great shot on it. It starts running. He shoots it again, then it turns and starts charging him. And the guy's friend and the PH both shoot it as it's coming towards him. And the PH, I think, was using a 4.58 lot, and I think his friend had a 500 Nitro double. And I think he hit it in the head. So I don't know that it would have made that much difference if you would have used, a 40 caliber versus the 50 caliber with his shot placement on it that finally brought it down. But it was very interesting to see the effect of the bigger stuff and the headshot on it coming at him like that, and just boom, just ended it very decisively.
Yeah, but if you look at a lot of these buffalo hunting videos, quite often the guy shoots and the buffalo runs. There's no reaction. That buffalo doesn't react at all. But if you hit bone on the shoulder and stuff like that, there is a reaction, because you're affecting his skeletal structure and his movement. You shoot him behind the shoulder through the ribs, so sometimes those buffalo run off and there's no reaction whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. We had a client years ago that used a 577 Nitro, and he shot a buffalo with it. Did not make a very good shot. It was a close frontal shot, a little bit quartering, but mainly frontal. Pulled it, I sent you the video of it, pulled it off to the side and hit the brachial plexus of this buffalo. And but as it ran away, like it made it clearly look like it had been hit by a truck like that. And it was one of these things that after he shot it and it ran away, that he didn't get a second shot because it recoiled too much and all of that. And they were thinking, man, this is going to be a mess going into that. I'm not looking forward to this as a wounded buffalo. And fortunately, they found it just 100 yards away and run away and died. And so I kind of wonder if maybe they just got lucky. Maybe this was, it hit an artery or something that ordinarily wouldn't have gotten hit.
Oh, might have hit the liver, or if it was caught, probably hit the liver as well. And that liver shot with a big caliber bullet can be extremely debilitating. Or might have hit a kidney or something like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that's the trouble with these big rifles. Their recoil is so excessive, and your recovery time is so slow because the rifle's coming out of recoil. It's at 45 degrees, or probably even more than that. That it takes you an extra second or two to get reloaded and back on because just of the recoil.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, all the different levers that you can pull here, right? You go into this hunt with say a 9.3 or a 3.75 or something, and it is something on the lower powered end, but still something that is adequate for buffalo. You are almost certainly going to have better shot placement with that, and things are probably going to go fine. But as you go up in power, up in bullet diameter, you're making a bigger hole, delivering more damage to the buffalo with a single round than you would with a 9.3 or a 3.75, but it has more recoil, and so it's harder to shoot accurately, and it's harder to get back on target for a fast follow-up and whatnot. And so it's just an interesting thing with all these levers that you're trying to pull here, trying to get the best mix of all of that stuff. And for most people, it's probably the 9.3 or the 3.75, but I can certainly understand the argument for using one of these bigger bore cartridges like that. And that buffalo example was a good one like that, because maybe with a poor shot like that with a 9.3 or a 3.75, they might have had a more exciting day than they ended up having. Who knows?
For sure. But I've just been I've been back to South Africa, and I spent some time in the Kruger National Park with my game ranger friend, whose everyday carry rifle is a Heim 450 Nitro Express, and he shoots 500 grain bullets that his rifle is regulated at 2,200 feet per second. And he's in the Kruger National Park, and he's right up at the north of the park, and there's a drought in Southern Africa at the moment, and that part of the park is against Mozambique, and the guys are all pretty hungry because their crops have failed. So he's battling with an increase in poaching, and mainly with snares. And while I was with him, there were two elephants that had snares around there. They had been caught in snares, and of course the elephants are strong, they break the snares, but the snares embedded in their legs. And because of the elephant overpopulation, it's just too much to go and get the elephant darted and get it down and try and beat the wound and all that. So they get an elephant that's caught in a snare, they just shoot them. And I was with him when he actually shot two elephants. But it's because it's a tourist area and tourists drive around, and so he said, I'm just going to shoot this as a big elephant cow. I'm just going to shoot it with body shots. And he took two shots with just shooting a 500 grain Dizombo, or I think they're Woodley Hydro solids. But it was quite amazing. The elephant was walking past, and he double tapped it. He shot two shots, bang, and his second shot was probably a second later. So he shot bang, bang with that double of his, and of course into the lung. The elephant ran off away from the road and died within 30 meters. But I mean, that's your recovery time with a guy that really knows how to shoot with a rifle. And his rifle weighs 11 pounds. It's a Heim, and he could shoot two shots left and right, bang, bang, and that quickly with a rifle that's well balanced and not ridiculous, and that's what you need. You need to be able to shoot those two shots quickly without having these rifles rising vertically in recoil and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that is a great place to stop tonight, and I think that's an excellent story and an excellent demonstration of, one, what a guy is capable of with the right gun and with the right training, with the right mindset, being experienced with it, and then two, a good example of quote unquote enough without being too much with all that.
Yeah, definitely. As you said before, there was a reason why that the recommendation for the Zimbabwe First Hunters Association was 500 grain 4.58 bullet thing, 2,150 feet per second, because that's basically what his rifle does, and you can see why, because it's manageable, it's effective, but and the recoil is not excessive. You're not going to all these ridiculous cartridges that are nice on paper, but in essence they're unpractical, and they're novelties. There's no practical use for them, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yep, fun to talk about, but yeah, not what I would want to use myself.
For sure.
Well, Kevin, it was great having you on the show tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this. I enjoyed it, and let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. I look forward to it, John. Yeah, just give me a shout.
So first off, I did put links in the show notes to those videos we talked about. The interview with David Petzel and Art Alphen, the guys shooting the 5.77 T-Rex and really struggling with the terrible recoil, the guys shooting that charging buffalo at just a couple paces, all that stuff. And if you like this episode, you will probably like my other interviews with Kevin. I have put links to those episodes in the show notes. He has been on the show a bunch of times. Now, you will probably also enjoy his books too. Now, The Perfect Shot was a revolutionary book when Kevin first published it back in the late 1990s. It's still an incredibly useful resource, especially the updated edition currently in print, The Perfect Shot 2. It has very interesting information about hunting the most popular species of game in Africa: buffalo, leopard, lion, elephant, hippo, crocodile, most of the really popular species of plains game, kudu, impala, wildebeest, all that sort of stuff. His book, It Shouldn't Happen, is a collection of interesting and often very humorous stories that he accumulated over his many years of hunting and living in southern Africa. Like I said, that's another just great book. I really enjoy reading it. I have put links to both of those books in the show notes as well. Shoot me an email, john@thebiggamehuntingblog.com, if you would like to hunt with me on the podcast hunt next year, or if you are interested in going to Africa at a discount this October or November 2024. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you sign up for my email list. If you like these podcasts, you will love my daily emails. To do that, click the link in the show notes or go to huntingguns101.com and sign up there. You'll get my free ebook on the best hunting calibers, and then you'll also start to receive the emails I send out every weekday about hunting, ballistics, shooting, guns, all that sort of stuff. So make sure you are getting those emails. Go to huntingguns101.com and sign up. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to thebiggamehuntingblog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? The things you know make you feel better, even when it's impossible to make time for them. Like that workout you try to squeeze in between kids' activities, work, and everything else you have going on, and before you know it, it gets pushed to tomorrow. Sound familiar? But it's the moments when you feel like you have no time for yourself when those non-negotiables are more important than ever. Those are the things that keep you strong, healthy, motivated, and prepared to take on everything life demands of you. So why not make therapy one of them? BetterHelp Online Therapy makes it easy to get started with affordable phone, video, or live chat sessions you can do from anywhere, and the option to message your therapist between sessions if anything comes up. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.